Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Sip&Talkers, wherever you are in the world, and welcome back to Sip&Talk.
Welcome, welcome.
I have to say, my inbox has been absolutely flooded after our last two chats. You know, the ones on leaning on a balloon to plot independence and from not an inch to I'm terrified. People are writing in saying, finally, you've given us a humorous weapon to fight back against all this abstract, over-the-top, official-sounding language.
Right. And, you know, to be honest, the e-data, the back-end metrics, they don't lie. Those two discussions really did break our traffic ceiling.
I knew it!
It just proves a point, I think. In today's really complex information environment, people don't need another dense academic paper. What they need is a translator.
A translator, yeah.
Something that takes all this, political black speech that sounds important but is actually kind of hollow and just translates it into human language. Humorous language.
Bingo! That is exactly it. So many listeners have said that now when they hear some of that wolf warrior rhetoric online, our analogies about being terrified or having a glass heart just pop right into their heads.
That's great to hear.
So, by popular demand, that's our mission today. We're going to inventory some more of these commonly used terms, especially the really positive, self-affirming ones that, don't quite hold up under pressure. We're going to humorously pull back the curtain on their underlying logic.
So before we can even get to the phrases themselves, we have to understand the system that creates them. We have to look at that hard-coded ideological foundation.
Let's do it. Our topic for today, stop throwing rocks. When Chinese idioms go global.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with this. This time warp we seem to be living in, it feels a little surreal, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
I mean, you and I can sit here and have a conversation about, generative AI, quantum computing, incredible leaps in technology. And at the same time, so much of the political language we're analyzing is rooted in an ideology, Marxist-Leninism, that's almost 200 years old.
It's a striking contrast, for sure.
It's like having a whiplash through time. How do those two things even exist in the same century?
Well, they do. And we have to understand that Marxist-Leninism, ML, it's so much more than just a dusty old concept in a book.
Right.
For the ruling regime in China, it is the fundamental, the absolute ideological bedrock. It informs, every political decision, every social structure, and for our conversation today, the very specific language they use.
So it's not just history, it's an active operating system.
It's the OS. And their own narrative, the story they tell themselves, is that adopting ML was a matter of historical necessity. You have to go back to the mid-19th century.
After the Opium Wars.
Exactly. After 1840, China was facing really an existential crisis. It was being carved up, falling into what they call a semi-colonial, semi-feudal state. They were desperate.
And all the other attempts to fix things just hadn't worked, right?
None of them. They tried everything. There was the Westernization movement, which was all about adopting technology.
Let's build better ships and guns.
Right. Then the 100 Days Reform, which tried to create a kind of constitutional monarchy, that failed. Even the 1911 revolution that got rid of the emperor, it just led to decades of warlords and chaos. Nothing was working.
So they were basically shopping for a new model of government.
A new blueprint for power and organization. And then, after the Russian October Revolution, Marxist-Leninism shows up, and it brings two incredibly powerful things to the table.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is the Leninist Party organization model. This was a structure that was highly disciplined, completely centralized. It was designed specifically to seize power and, crucially, to hold it. That was the missing piece.
And the second thing?
It offered a logically consistent, all-encompassing theory of everything.
Ah, the grand narrative.
The grand narrative. Historical materialism claimed to have discovered the iron laws of history. It promised that communism was inevitable. It gave people a sense of purpose, of a destiny.
And it also gave them a very practical tool for revolution, didn't it? The whole theory of exploitation.
Absolutely. The focus on exploitation was brilliant in a way. It gave them a clear, identifiable enemy, the landlord class, and a powerful reason to mobilize the huge farming population.
But it was still a foreign idea. How did it take root?
Well, that's where Mao Zedong's genius came in. He Sinicized it. He adapted the theory to China's reality.
He made it local.
He centered the revolution not on urban factory workers like in Russia, but on the farmers. And that became Mao Zedong thought. It made this foreign doctrine feel Chinese.
So fast forward to today, this isn't just a historical footnote.
Not at all. It's the active cornerstone of their legitimacy. Official statements are very clear on this. They say the ML ancestor cannot be lost.
Wow.
The logic is, if you abandon ML, you abandon the entire theoretical basis for how you came to power. And that, they believe, would lead to the collapse of the party and the state. It's the absolute core value.
And that core value comes with some serious baggage. This is where we get to the idea of class struggle, the hard-coded fight gene.
That's the key, that adversarial nature. Marx himself said that class struggle is the driving force of human history.
And Lenin took that and ran with it.
He amplified it with the dictatorship of the proletariat. And this wasn't just theory. For decades in China land reform, the anti-rightist campaign, the Cultural Revolution life, was defined by this constant, often violent struggle.
But didn't that change in the 1980s with Deng Xiaoping? Yeah. The focus shifted to the economy?
Officially, yes. The idea of internal class struggle was de-emphasized. The state said the exploiting class was, gone.
Right.
But, and this is the crucial point, the mindset never went away.
It just found a new target.
It modernized the struggle. It found new enemies. Internally, the target shifted from landlords to, say, bourgeois liberalization, or any political factions that might challenge control.
And externally?
Externally, it became a perpetual system struggle, an ideological struggle against the West, particularly the United States. So the enemy changes from a local landlord to a global hegemon. But the structural need for an enemy is constant.
This is what you call the struggle module. This is such a useful way to think about it.
It really is.
For you, the listener, picture it like this. Imagine the entire political system is running on like a 200-year-old software program. It's the operating system.
Right.
Most of the time it's running modern apps, global trade, tech development. But there's this old hidden subroutine baked into the core code. That's the struggle module.
And when does that module get triggered?
It launches automatically whenever the system is under stress. An economic downturn, a bit of social unrest, a pandemic, a big policy mistake.
Any kind of crisis.
Exactly. And the module's default setting is to immediately start classifying the world into friends and enemies. It pushes all the blame outwards. Everything becomes the fault of hostile forces or class enemies.
Which then justifies a crackdown.
Right. It justifies tightening control, purging dissent, all while completely avoiding the real systemic reason for the crisis in the first place.
This logic is so deep-seated that a lot of critical analysis describes the whole philosophy with this three-part framework. The deception, incitement, struggle, genealogy.
Okay, let's break those three down. First, deception. What does that look like?
Deception is the strategic use of lies, but more importantly, an absolute monopoly on media. It's about lubricating violence and control.
Lubricating violence?
Yeah. If the government controls every single information channel, from school textbooks to social media algorithms, it can frame any action, no matter how harsh, as being for the people's own good. The goal is to create a kind of fear-based submission through total narrative control.
Okay, so that's deception. What about incitement?
Incitement is the active manufacturing of hatred. Historically, it was about pitting social classes against one another.
Landlords versus peasants.
Right. Today, it's more about stoking this really intense, sometimes aggressive nationalism, or creating divisions between groups, blaming problems on an external enemy. The goal is to keep the population focused on fighting a perceived enemy so they don't look too closely at the power structure itself.
It's a distraction.
It's a powerful distraction. And that brings us to the third one, struggle.
Struggle.
This is the core belief that governing itself is fundamentally a violent action. It's about destroying old social orders and maintaining power. This constant state of tension is seen as necessary to keep power concentrated and unchallenged.
So when you put all that together, deception, incitement, struggle, what's the end result?
The end result is what we can call abstraction and negativity. All the beautiful complexity of human relationships, and just boils it down to these cold, hard categories of class or political opposition.
Friend or enemy.
Friend or enemy. Black or white. The individual person just becomes a tool for the collective, or really a tool for the party. And that's why you see a structural neglect of things like individual rights or universal human values.
So ML is the root system. The struggle module is the engine that runs on it. And all this aggressive language we're about to talk about, that's the exhaust. It's the necessary byproduct.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's move into section 2 and start translating some of that exhaust, starting with the phrases they use to define and dismiss any external enemy.
Let's do it. These are the direct output of that struggle module firing up.
These phrases aren't meant for a real debate, are they? It's more about labeling and shutting down the conversation.
Exactly. It's about enemy abstraction. We've picked 3 of the most common idioms you'll hear in response to any kind of international criticism.
And they all operate on the same basic premise, right? That any criticism is actually an attack.
It's an attack that has to be, morally canceled out and then shot right back at the critic.
Okay, let's start with the all-time classic, the one that's always delivered with a very stern look. Throwing rocks to smash one's own feet.
本期to zaziji de xiao. The official intent is a very clear warning. Any external interference sanctions, diplomatic pressure, criticism from the U.S. or Europe is fundamentally self-destructive.
It's going to backfire.
It will always harm the attacker more than it harms China.
This is the one that always makes me laugh a little. I mean, they've been issuing this warning for decades. For decades, they've been saying, you're about to smash your own feet with that rock. If the rock really smashes the thrower's feet every single time, how are the feet of the U.S. or the EU still walking around? It's like a boomerang sanction that, I guess, always misses the target and somehow hits the person who threw it.
But they keep throwing it.
They keep throwing it. It implies that the West is just pathologically committed to self-harm.
Your humor there really gets to the logical flaw in it. Because this is classic victim-blaming language.
Victim blame?
It takes what might be completely legitimate criticism about trade policy, about human rights, and it instantly reframes it as a malicious attack designed to hold China down.
So it's not really for an international audience.
Its primary function is domestic. Absolutely. By constantly painting the government and the nation as a perpetual victim of these hostile outside forces, it achieves 2 things. First, it morally discredits the critic in the eyes of its own people. And second, it reinforces that internal political unity we talked about. It's a powerful tool for distracting from whatever the original internal problem was.
So the rock is just a narrative shield.
It's a narrative shield. And you'll notice, the bigger the internal political pressure, the bigger the rock they claim the West is throwing.
Got it. Okay, next up, the phrase used to dismiss anyone on the inside who dares to speak up. A small handful of people.
Yi xiao kuo ren. The goal here is just blatant minimization.
Shrink them down to nothing.
Right. Shrink their numbers, their political influence, their legitimacy. If it's just an insignificant, small handful, then their concerns can be totally ignored, marginalized, or even crushed without any real consequence.
You know, it's funny. I use that phrase when I'm standing in line for coffee and I'm getting impatient. I tell myself, it's okay. It's only a small handful of people in front of you.
Right.
But that small handful still makes me late for work. And in this context, if this small handful, a few lawyers, a few journalists, some students, is really so tiny and insignificant, why on earth does the state need to deploy the entire national security apparatus against them?
That's the paradox, isn't it?
The media censorship, the police, the courts, it's like using a sledgehammer to kill a fly. It suggests that maybe they're not so insignificant after all.
The scale of the response tells you everything. It tells you that they aren't fighting a few people, they're fighting an idea that poses a genuine threat to their monopoly on the narrative.
So what's the function of the phrase?
We could call it the unigizing of public opinion. When you can't logically rebut the criticism, because maybe the criticism is based on facts, the easiest thing to do is just minimize and dehumanize the source. And politically, it's a huge red flag.
How so?
It signals a system that has no real mechanism for social representation. In any healthy society, the voice of the minority, even a small handful, is supposed to be heard and considered. When a government's only response is to label and neutralize, it's admitting it cannot tolerate any challenge to its single monolithic story.
It's much easier to say we're fighting 5 enemies than it is to admit we're ignoring the complaints of 500,000 citizens.
That's it in a nutshell.
Okay, the third one. This one might hold the world record for most frequent use in diplomatic statements, harming the feelings of the Chinese people.
Shanghai le zhongguo renmin de gan king.
This is the ultimate catch-all, isn't it? It can be used for anything, from a politician's comment to a company's T-shirt design.
It's a blanket condemnation for any act that's deemed offensive to the political status quo.
I always wonder about the logistics of this. Is the collective sentiment of 1.4 billion people stored in some kind of hyperfragile glass case? Is it a glass smartphone that shatters if you look at it wrong?
It's remarkably sensitive.
I mean, if a single cartoon can inflict deep emotional trauma on an entire nation, we should be applying for a Guinness World Record for the world's most fragile national sentiment.
It's potent because it's pure moral blackmail.
Moral blackmail. Explain that.
It intentionally, and I would argue deceptively, equates the regime's political position, the parties face with the genuine collective emotion of the entire population.
So it merges the party and the people into one emotional entity.
Precisely. And it's designed to force international companies or governments into a possible corner. They have to choose. Do you want access to our massive market, or do you want to uphold your own values like freedom of speech or human rights?
You can't have both.
You can't have both. It collapses that basic distinction that we take for granted in the West, which is that the government is not the same thing as the people. So the feelings being protected are rarely the actual feelings of the people, but almost always the political face of the ruling party.
That's the key translation right there. It's not about the people's feelings, it's about the party's face.
That's the core takeaway. And these three phrases are just the tip of the iceberg. They're part of a much larger, very structured language arsenal.
A whole vocabulary for enemy analysis.
An entire vocabulary, all built on these ML principles. We can run through a few more really.
Good.
So, against internal enemies, you hear traitor or running dog for anyone seen as too pro-Western. You have separatists for any movements in Taiwan, Xinjiang, or Tibet.
And externally.
The U.S. is always accused of having a hegemonic mentality. Anyone critical of military expansion is a warmonger. And the catch-all is just anti-China forces.
Right. And anytime there's a protest, it's immediately blamed on a foreign-backed color revolution.
Exactly. And then they have their self-defense terms, like double standard or hypocrisy, to deflect any criticism by pointing out flaws in the West and smearing China, which just dismisses all negative press as propaganda. It's a closed loop.
A completely sealed system. And this brings us to a really stark, real-world example of this language in action. The verdict against the media owner Jimmy Lai.
Yes. The guilty verdict for conspiracy to collude with foreign forces is the perfect legal embodiment of this entire struggle legacy.
It's like they took all this political jargon and turned it into a legal document.
A massive one. The verdict was 855 pages long. And it basically provides the legal blueprint for defining this internal-external enemy dynamic. It took these abstract ideas and made them concrete and legally binding.
So what did it actually say?
Well, it claimed Lai had a deep-seated resentment towards China, and that his newspaper was designed to incite hatred. That's the incitement gene right there. The most critical part is that it explicitly named the external forces.
They put names to the anti-China forces.
They did. The ruling listed specific U.S. government officials, members of Congress, and NGOs that Lai had met with. His crime was lobbying them for sanctions.
So those abstract phrases we were just talking about, collusion, foreign forces, they now have a specific legal definition attached to them in a Hong Kong court.
That is the synthesis. The verdict legally defines Lai as the internal traitor and provides the list of the external enemy. It is the clearest possible sign that this Leninist concept of enemy analysis is still the fundamental basis for national security policy.
That is heavy. It shows this isn't just rhetoric. It has devastating real-world consequences for people.
It does.
Okay, let's pivot. We've talked about the negative abstractions, the language used against enemies. What about the flip side? The positive abstractions, the super self-congratulatory terms used to describe their own system.
Right. The phrase is designed to mask the flaws.
Let's start with the big one, the one that underpins everything. Socialism with Chinese characteristics.
朱与中体社会社会主義. This is the official answer to the big question. How can you be a socialist country with a huge, booming capitalist-style market?
This phrase, to me, is like ordering a McDonald's with Chinese characteristics.
Okay, I like where this is going.
You walk in expecting the universal Big Mac experience, cheese, beef, the special sauce. But what they bring you is like fried dough and tofu pudding. You can call it characteristic, but you can't really call it a Big Mac. The characteristic part just feels like a polite way of saying, I make the rules and you can't copy me.
That analogy absolutely nails the central contradiction, because all the analysis from major news outlets and financial institutions points to the same thing. The core characteristic is a dual structure. It has the skin of a market economy, but the bones are controlled by the party.
Skin and bones.
It's an opportunistic but very effective modification of traditional ML. See, when we talk about a market economy in the West, we just assume certain things are built in. The rule of law, private property rights that are secure. The basics. But the Chinese characteristic is that political risk will always, always outweigh economic loss.
We've seen that play out pretty dramatically.
Oh, absolutely. Look at the massive crackdowns in recent years. The private education industry was basically destroyed overnight by a policy change. Tech giants like Ant Group had their record-breaking IPO canceled at the very last second.
Because they fell out of political favor.
Because the party-controlled bones asserted themselves. It sent a clear message. Economic stability and investor confidence are secondary to the political agenda, and that means the guarantee of private property rights is always conditional.
So for any foreign company there, every decision isn't just about business, it's a political calculation. That uncertainty is the real characteristic.
It's the institutionalization of political risk, which brings us to the next term, which is always used to defend this system, institutional advantage.
The big claim here is efficiency, right? The system can concentrate all its power and resources to do huge things fast.
Build high-speed rail, lift millions out of poverty, have a unified response to a pandemic. They contrast this with the gridlock you sometimes see in Western democracies.
To me, this is like having a super powerful AI assistant.
Okay.
You can ask it to do a massive, complex task like write a 50-page report on quantum physics, and it will do it instantly and perfectly. It has incredible, concentrated power for big things quickly.
Right.
But because it lacks flexibility and, common sense, if you give it a simple task like, hey, go buy me a coffee, it might just decide the most efficient solution is to buy the entire Starbucks corporation.
And it would justify it as being the most logical path.
Exactly. The cost of that efficiency is sacrificing individual choice and any ability for the system to correct its own mistakes.
Your analogy gets right to the trade-off. Because this institutional advantage is real, in a sense. The root of it is highly concentrated power, which leads to very low decision costs. When the leader makes a decision, it happens immediately.
But that's also its biggest weakness.
It's the institutional disadvantage. That same power concentration is a massive problem when you need transparency, accountability, or the ability to correct errors.
What are some examples of that?
We saw it in the early days of the pandemic. Local officials were too afraid to report bad news up the chain of command, which led to critical delays. We've seen it with sudden policy reversals that cause huge economic disruptions, like power outages in manufacturing hubs because of a top-down mandate on coal use.
So the cost to make the decision is low, but the cost of the mistake, when it happens, is enormous.
Astronomical. Because there's no feedback loop to catch it early. It's the difference between speed and resilience. The system is incredibly fast, but not very resilient.
It prioritizes efficiency over adaptability. Okay, final positive term. This one is the most semantic, I think. Whole process people's democracy.
Quangguosheng Renmin Minzu. This was created specifically as a rebuttal to Western criticism about the lack of democracy.
So what's the claim?
The claim is that their model is actually a deeper, more comprehensive form of democracy. It includes consultation, decision-making, management. It's not just about voting every few years.
You know what that sounds like? It sounds like my credit card company telling me I participated in the whole process of my debt. Sure, I participated in the swiping the card part, but I had zero say in the interest rate, the fees, the repayment terms. It wasn't democracy, it was whole process notification of decisions someone else made.
That's a perfect analogy, because you've identified the missing piece, accountability. All the analysis from think tanks points to the unstated fine print in this concept.
Which is?
The process is under the party's leadership. That's the key clause. This whole phrase is a work of semantic reconstruction in its attempt to seize the definition of democracy on the world stage and claim a superior version.
But it leaves out the core components.
It deliberately avoids the things we consider central to democracy: free and competitive elections, and a system where the government is actually accountable to the people it governs.
So whether it's the economy, the institutions, or the democracy, the underlying logic is always the same.
The party must maintain absolute control. And all these grand-sounding concepts are just tailored to justify that control.
So when we sum all of this up, a very clear pattern emerges, doesn't it? It feels like the more the system tries to make something sound positive, great, unique, and unshakable,
The more abstract it becomes.
the more abstract and, frankly, the more logically flawed it is when you actually look at it. And that's where the humor comes in. The second we use an analogy, a McDonald's burger, a credit card statement, an AI assistant, we drag these huge abstract words back down to reality, and that's what exposes the defect.
That's the value of this whole exercise. That ML legacy we started with, it guarantees a language of dichotomy. Everything is black or white, friend or enemy. There's no room for gray areas.
No room for things like constructive criticism.
Or legitimate political opposition, or even good faith competition. All relationships have to be defined through this vocabulary of smashing feet, traitors, and harming feelings.
So what we're trying to do here at Sip&Talk is just provide a way to translate that constant antagonism.
We're trying to inject some rational thought into it. Humor is just the best way to break through that information silo and encourage, critical, independent thinking.
It's about not letting the jargon intimidate you, but seeing the political engineering behind the words.
Exactly. And now that you, our listeners, understand this historical foundation, the deception, incitement, struggle framework, and how this struggle module is still hard-coded in the political DNA. We have one last thought for you.
A final provocative question.
A provocative question. When you look at the big economic decisions coming out of Beijing now, the ones that affect all of us, think about how they regulate their own huge tech sector, or how they're planning their global supply chain strategy for critical things like semiconductors or green energy.
Okay.
And ask yourself this question. Are they making these decisions based purely on what we would call economic rationality and market stability? Or are their decisions fundamentally shaped by the rigid adversarial logic of the struggle module? A logic that needs to constantly classify everything, trading partners, technologies, even companies, as either a friend to be controlled or an enemy to be struggled against.
That tension between modern economics and this old doctrine of struggle is fascinating.
It's the conflict that's going to define global politics and trade for the next decade. So just keep watching for those telltale phrases.
What a thing to watch for. We really hope this chat has given you some useful tools and analysis to navigate what can be a very confusing and deliberately obscured landscape.
We always want to stress that our goal is just to provide objective understanding. It's never about criticism or discrimination against any nation, any group, or any people. It's just about encouraging critical and independent thought.
Thank you so much for joining us for another Sip and Talk. Please don't forget to subscribe to our feed so you don't miss any of our future conversations.
And also, please go check out our good friend Mickey's YouTube channel. It's called Mickytolife. He's got some really fun memes, and his latest travel vlogs are fantastic.
We'll see you next time.